What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be going over the top 10 wide receivers for the 2021 season. Considering we are now in August, this will be a good jumping off point for some of you newer viewers out there, and more of a refresher for those of you following us throughout this entire off season. Before we do get into the video though, just a quick shout out and reminder that if you do enjoy the videos we're putting out, the best way to show your support is simply by hitting that like button. It only takes a moment for you, but greatly helps us out in growing the channel. For those of you that don't know, we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and our goal is to hit that by the start of the NFL season. With all of your help, we can definitely make that a reality, but it's going to take every like and every subscription to make sure that happens. So if you do enjoy, make sure to hit that like button, and if you're new, maybe you haven't subscribed yet, consider taking today as an opportunity to do so. Also, guys, be advised, our draft package is available now. If you want access to all of our must-own players, our sleepers, our targets, our busts, our tier-based rankings, risk ratings, player projections, video player breakdowns on the top 150 players, access to our private Discord community group, and more, you can get that at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link, as always, in the description box below. With that being said, it's time to hop over to our stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was DeAndre Hopkins and Stefon Diggs led the league in receiving yards through the first 8 weeks of the season. Which player through that same span ranked third? The correct answer was actually Robbie Anderson. Congratulations to Tristan Cesiri, the first to get this right on YouTube. And as for Twitter, at BenDove254-80510. Once again, congratulations to both of you. But as for today's stat of the day, who was the youngest tight end to catch a touchdown pass last season? Once again, that's who is the youngest tight end to catch a touchdown pass in 2020. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Without further ado though, it's time to hop right into the video, and for full transparency, these top 10 players are going to be based upon Underdog's ADP. The reason we use Underdog is because it's the most accurate, at least at this point in the offseason as of recording early August. Underdog, as we know, they're best ball leagues, paid leagues, so people who are joining these leagues are having a vested interest in making sure that this ADP is accurate. Everyone who contributes to this ADP does have their own money on the line. If you guys would be interested in trying Underdog yourself, we do have a promo code FFA. That will of course be linked in the description box below, but we'll begin with the first player, none other than DaVante Adams of the Green Bay Packers. With the news that Aaron Rodgers is going to return to Green Bay, there is no doubt in our minds that DaVante Adams does deserve to be the #1 wide receiver. Adams is coming off of his 2020 season in which he appeared in 14 games. In those 14 games, received an average of over 10 targets per game, totaling 149 on the season, converting 115 of those into receptions for 1,374 receiving yards. But what was most impressive was his touchdowns, in which he was able to compile 18 through 14 games. One thing we do have to realize though is that Aaron Rodgers and his touchdown rate, while it is on average one of the highest in the league when compared to other quarterbacks, it still was abnormally high for him. So although we do believe he will once again be efficient for 2021 when it comes to red zone completion rate and touchdown conversion rate, it would just be unrealistic to expect him to play at once again an MVP caliber level. Regardless though, DaVante Adams has virtually no competition for targets in his offense. The team did not bring in any massive free agents. They did draft a wide receiver, but we do know that they are lacking depth at that position. In the receiving back, Jamal Williams, he is now left to free agency and is on the Detroit Lions, paving the way for Aaron Jones to likely take up more receiving work. This will have little to no effect on DaVante Adams, paving the way for him to yet again have another top 3 season. The only other wide receiver that could be considered to be taken over DaVante Adams, and with Aaron Rodgers there really is no case, but the second wide receiver we have is Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs. Tyreek Hill definitely should not be overlooked. This is a player who could easily lead the league in many major categories. He's one of the few wide receivers that can do a lot on a very minimal target share. Believe it or not, the 2020 season was actually his best season for fantasy overall for his entire career. He actually did finish second in the entire league on the back of 135 targets, just 87 receptions for 1,276 receiving yards to go along with 15 receiving touchdowns. While his 135 targets he received in 2020 was not a career high for him, it was just too shy from his career high, coming in at 137 27 back in 2018. And in that season, we saw very similar production. Actually, when comparing his 2020 stats to his 2018 stats, we saw remarkably similar numbers, with each season only separated by a mere 1 fantasy point. In 2020, he scored 328.9 fantasy points. In 2018, 328 flat. So definitely, if he receives that type of volume market share, 135 plus targets, you can expect a very similar type of production. Heading into this season, the Kansas City Chiefs should once again be one of the top offenses in the league, led by Travis Kelce, premiering Tyreek Hill, and realistically behind those players, nobody has yet carved out a role. Sammy Watkins has now exited in free agency, paving the way for a possibility for both Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill to see possibly more volume. Regardless though, additional volume is something Tyreek Hill doesn't need to produce, because we know as long as he gets 130 plus targets, a virtual lock for 2021, he is going to put up top 5 wide receiver numbers. With that, it's time to jump over to the wide receiver ranked third, none other than Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills. Stefon Diggs himself coming off of his best fantasy season by a wide margin. He actually finished third last season on the back of 166 targets, 127 receptions for 1,535 receiving yards to go along with 8 receiving touchdowns. Clearly, these type of target totals are far different than what we saw from Tyreek Hill. Stefon Diggs, while definitely a player who can get it done deep downfield and can make big plays happen, he's going to get his production through the area of volume. This means if you are in a full PPR league, maybe if you're choosing between Tyreek Hill or maybe Stefon Diggs, or if you like DeAndre Hopkins, while you can't go wrong with either player, just knowing that DeAndre Hopkins and Stefon Diggs are much better players in PPR and half PPR leagues, that may be enough to veer you from one player to the next. Regardless though, Stefon Diggs heading into this season, it is going to be his second season on the Buffalo Bills offense. Typically with free agent wide receivers transitioning from teams, like Stefon Diggs moving from Minnesota to Buffalo, we typically see some growing pains where the chemistry between the quarterback and wide receiver isn't quite there. Stefon Diggs felt absolutely none of these growing pains, so while typically we would give a bump to a receiver being his second year in an offense, unfortunately Stefon Diggs, he doesn't get that bump because from day one he was producing, but it's Stefon Diggs, he doesn't need a bump. When looking at him coming off the board as the third overall wide receiver, it's a safe pick. The Buffalo Bills offense is a passing offense. They didn't bring in any significant weapons in the backfield, meaning Devin Singletary, Zach Moss will be leading this backfield. Definitely one of the weaker backfields in the league, but once again, that shouldn't matter too much because the Buffalo Bills offense will be passing at one of the higher rates in the league. This will directly benefit Stefon Diggs, and just like his ADP as the wide receiver 3, we also have him ranked as the wide receiver 3, but let's move on to the fourth player. But before we do, I do have a quick call to action for you guys so you can help us with a video we're making later on this week. We want to go over your must-own players for this upcoming year. So your must-own quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end. And all we ask is in the comment section, let us know who is your absolute must-own player at each position, and overall, who is your number one must-own player for the 2021 season. With that being said, let's hop over to the fourth player on this list, and we're moving over to Arizona. It's DeAndre Hopkins of the Cardinals. DeAndre Hopkins, I view very similarly to Stefon Diggs. Both of them were free agent wide receivers last season. Both of them I felt brought in a significant amount of risk, being wide receiver 1s in their offense previously, but now joining a new team with a new quarterback, an unclear target distribution. We weren't sure what to expect, but DeAndre Hopkins blew away our wildest expectations. In 2020, he received 160 targets, converted that into 115 receptions for 1,407 receiving yards to go along with 6 receiving touchdowns. Now clearly, Hopkins, similarly to Diggs, is going to be a PPR play. One thing I will note about his 2020 production though, is that through the second half of the season, more towards the tail end of the season when Kyle Murray sustained his shoulder injury, DeAndre Hopkins was definitely a player to feel the brunt of that. In fact, several of DeAndre Hopkins' worst games of the year came after that injury, and very few of his very high scoring games came after the injury as well. So anybody just looking at his first half numbers and think maybe he slowed down because he was a bit hobbled or maybe tired because he's getting up there in age, no, that wasn't the case at all. The offense under Kyler, while I can't say struggled post-injury, it definitely wasn't as proficient as it was pre-injury. But on the bright side, heading into 2021, all signs are Kyler Murray is a go. DeAndre Hopkins himself, he is also fully healthy. And when it comes to any significant moves or acquisitions that this team made that could potentially impact DeAndre Hopkins or his target market share, realistically, none of note. The team did add free agent wide receiver AJ Green. Christian Kirk still, of course, on the roster. roster. But other than that, they brought in promising rookie Rondale Moore. He will be competing more with Christian Kirk and AJ Green to see field time. As for the backfield, Chase Edmonds returns. Kenyon Drake, he's out of here. And insert James Conner. So virtually lateral moves all across the board. One thing I will note is that the wide receiver room as a whole definitely is stronger this season. And while I don't think that is going to be at the detriment of DeAndre Hopkins, if anything, I think that will help this offense run more smoothly, potentially get this team into scoring range more often. So overall, no negative effects for DeAndre Hopkins. In fact, nothing but positive. We have DeAndre Hopkins actually ranked as the wide receiver 5. As I mentioned, his ADP is the wide receiver 4. So if you're wondering which wide receiver caused this discrepancy, which wide receiver we have ranked above DeAndre Hopkins this season, well, the answer to that is Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. Calvin Ridley is coming off of a very successful season. Some could call it his breakout season. And while Calvin Ridley has been a serviceable fantasy asset ever since he was drafted back in 2018, we do have to come to the understanding that Ridley has never once finished inside the top 20 at the wide receiver position. This past season, though, he completely dominated that, finishing as the wide receiver 5. That was on the back of 143 targets, 90 receptions for 1,374 receiving yards to go along with 9 receiving touchdowns. Heading into this season, the big news, of course, Julio Jones no longer on the roster. Julio Jones was a wide receiver who commanded in this offense 150 plus targets per season. While last year his health really wasn't all that there for him, that did give us a glimpse into what it would be like for Calvin Ridley to completely lead this team at the wide receiver position. And what we saw while Calvin Ridley was in that role, he was completely dominant. If you look at his overall target market share in games Julio Jones was out, in those games Calvin Ridley was a virtual lock to receive double-digit targets, something we should once again expect for the 2021 season. Reason being, the Atlanta Falcons have done absolutely nothing to significantly improve their defense. Their poor defense is one of the reasons why they're such a pass-friendly team. If you think about it, the Atlanta Falcons are the perfect storm for garbage time. They have a poor defense that oftentimes puts them in situations where they're playing from behind 2+ scores in the third and fourth quarter, oftentimes leading to garbage time type production. In addition to that, when this team does have a lead, they have a difficult time holding it and running out the clock because their run game is on the weaker side. Heading into this season, once again, they should have another weak run game with Mike Davis, the 29-year-old running back coming over from Carolina. Obviously, this is not a long-term solution, so we're not expecting Mike Davis to just completely surprise us. This all adds up to, once again, the Atlanta Falcons bringing in a very similar package to what they had in the 2020 season. The main difference, though, no Julio Jones. As for additional wide receivers they brought in, nobody of note. Russell Gage, we are expecting him to take a step forward. Also, Kyle Pitts, the rookie tight end. We're clearly expecting big things from him, but it's undeniable when you look at this offense, Calvin Ridley is the lone bright spot. We have no doubt in our minds that this passing game will move through Calvin Ridley, and for that, he comes in as one of the safest wide receivers to target in the early rounds. Definitely a player we have as a target, which should answer your questions as to why we have him ranked as the wide receiver 4 when his ADP is the wide receiver 5, and why exactly we flip-flopped him and DeAndre Hopkins. Moving into the wide receiver 6, though, we have DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. Wide receiver 6 is his ADP. Also the same spot we have him ranked. Interestingly enough, though, when we're moving from Calvin Ridley, a player who I would deem one of the safest wide receivers in the early rounds, unfortunately, when it comes to DK Metcalf, I can't quite say the same thing. Don't get me wrong, if we're talking sheer upside, DK Metcalf has it. I don't think anybody's out there denying that DK Metcalf could finish as the overall wide receiver 1 for 2021. My only potential concern when it comes to DK Metcalf is when we saw Russell Wilson have his tale of two seasons where he was performing at an MVP caliber level at the early portion of the season, but over the second half, we really saw a decline, and DK Metcalf also felt that. While Metcalf is entering his third year, typically the breakout year, we do have to come to the realization that if the Seattle Seahawks offense struggles and Russell Wilson is forced to either pass the ball less or the offense overall gets more run focused, this is going to be at the detriment of DK Metcalf. In addition to that, Tyler Lockett isn't going anywhere. While Tyler Lockett in 2020 was wildly inconsistent, only having really 3 big, massive games, heading into 2021, there's no saying exactly if Tyler Lockett will be as phased out of the offense as he was on a routine basis last season, and how that will have an impact on DK Metcalf. Now, I don't think overall from a season-long perspective, anybody should worry about DK Metcalf. Just know that his production is heavily tied into many other factors. Moving into the wide receiver 7, we have A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans, and to be clear, A.J. Brown was a player I absolutely loved to begin this offseason. I thought he could easily compete with any of the other top 5 wide receivers when it comes to sheer upside, potentially a player that had the ability to crack that upper echelon with the DaVante Adams and Tyreek Hills, but unfortunately, I don't believe that we'll get an ability to really see A.J. Brown's true upside. Reason being, the Tennessee Titans did trade for Julio Jones, and while this is definitely a good move overall for their offense, pairing A.J. Brown with Julio Jones to go along with Derrick Henry in the run game makes this one of the most dynamic offenses in the league. Clearly, this team will have plenty of scoring opportunities, potentially even more than they've had over the past 2 seasons under Ryan Tannehill, which is saying a lot because this team has been one of the better offenses ever since he joined the team. Now, right off the bat, more scoring opportunities you would think would help a player like A.J. Brown, but realistically, A.J. Brown is a player who could score from any part of the field. If he was receiving top 5 level targets, A.J. Brown would find a way to score regardless of if he was in the red zone or not. Don't get me wrong though, A.J. Brown is still a phenomenal player to draft. You could also make the argument that Julio Jones is going to relieve some of the pressure off of him, allowing A.J. Brown to take advantage of opposing defenses more frequently, leading to potentially more scoring opportunities in a more fantasy-friendly situation. So if you buy into that narrative, then A.J. Brown has just as much upside as ever. But unfortunately, when comparing him to the other wide receivers leading up to him in this video, I just don't have him in the same tier. I don't see him as a player that has the same amount of safety or upside. Alright guys, moving into the player we have as the 8th wide receiver off the board based on Underdog's ADP, we have Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. We really don't need to say too much on Justin Jefferson. As a rookie in 2020, he finished as the wide receiver 6 in both standard and PPR on the back of 125 targets, a mere 88 receptions, converting that into 1,400 receiving yards to go along with 7 receiving touchdowns. Now clearly, you don't need me to tell you that is a phenomenal rookie season, a record-breaking rookie season. So heading into 2021, with the offense being more comfortable to Justin Jefferson, his chemistry with veteran quarterback Kirk Cousins, he had an entire year to develop that, and Adam Thielen, the other wide receiver, lining up alongside of him. We should expect him to take more of a backseat in this passing offense. Clearly, Justin Jefferson, the lead wide receiver in this offense, his target market share as safe as it comes on this team. Just keep in mind though that the Minnesota Vikings team as a whole is not one of the highest when it comes to overall passing volume, but when it comes to Justin Jefferson, he proved in his rookie season to not need that type of volume, similarly to Tyreek Hill, a player who can get 120, 130 targets and still produce like a wide receiver 1. Those are the types of expectations we have from Justin Jefferson, only a big-bodied frame, a fast wide receiver, somebody who we could also see develop into a red zone threat himself. Moving into the wide receiver 9, we have arguably one of the safest wide receivers, Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers. Now, when it comes to Keenan Allen, I know that a lot of people aren't looking to target him because while he does have the safety factor, many people look at him as a player lacking upside. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, he is coming off of a season in which he was unable to eclipse 1,000 receiving yards. That was on the back of 147 targets, so very similar to the target market share he was receiving with Phillip Rivers. He did also eclipse 100 receptions, so it is promising to see that was the production he could put in a first-year offense under Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is a quarterback that a lot of people are trying to get a piece of this season, and whether that means drafting Justin Herbert or getting a piece through Keenan Allen or maybe Mike Williams in the later stages of this draft, one thing that is for sure is that many people are high on Justin Herbert and him potentially taking a step forward for the 2021 season, his sophomore season. If that is the case, Keenan Allen is going to be the main beneficiary. As I had mentioned, Keenan Allen, 100 receptions in Justin Herbert's first season as a starter. Heading into year 2, you can definitely believe that he will once again be a safety net for Justin Herbert. And with the team moving away from Hunter Henry, who left in free agency and is now on the New England Patriots, this is going to open up additional targets in this offense. And while not all of them will go to Keenan Allen, with him being the highest targeted receiver in this offense, then you definitely believe he will get his own bump from the vacated targets of Hunter Henry. And with the other weapons in this offense being pretty inconsistent when it comes to Mike Williams and his inability to get it done, in addition to Austin Eckler, who did miss 6 games last season. And if both of those players do struggle yet again for the 2021 season, Keenan Allen will have no problem cracking the top 10 this season. Alright guys, we're moving into the final player on this list. It is the 10th wide receiver off the board, one that may come as a bit of a surprise. It's CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if you've followed this channel for a while, you know that we've been super high on CeeDee Lamb this entire offseason. We never had any major concerns with CeeDee Lamb other than his ADP potentially climbing, and at this point with his ADP as the wide receiver 10 off the board, while this is our worst fear because it means CeeDee Lamb isn't a player we can guarantee is going to make it on all of our teams, it is promising to see that the community as a whole is valuing CeeDee Lamb as they should. Previously, Amari Cooper, the presumed wide receiver 1 in this offense, was being drafted ahead of CeeDee Lamb, but due to Lamb receiving such glowing reports out of camp and Amari Cooper being a player dealing with an injury and Dak Prescott returning healthy for the most part, all signs for CeeDee Lamb are not only a go, but his ADP of the wide receiver 10 is actually one spot lower than where we have him ranked at the wide receiver 9. If that doesn't tell you exactly how high we are on Lamb this year, then I don't know what does. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.